The Winters family dinner table was always a battlefield, but tonight it felt like an ambush. Olivia Winters, the middle child of the prestigious Winters clan, sat stiffly in her chair, clutching a leather-bound notebook filled with dreams she had spent years nurturing. Her heart pounded as she prepared to unveil her vision, a groundbreaking software architecture company that would redefine enterprise computing. But before she could even open her mouth, her father cut in with his usual disdainful tone. "Tech startups are a dime a dozen," he scoffed, barely glancing up from the stack of legal briefs he had brought to the table. "Winters and Associates has been a respected law firm for 3 generations. That's real success, not this coding nonsense." Olivia swallowed hard, her throat tightening. She glanced at her older sister Diane, who smirked smugly across the table. "Come on, Dad," Diane chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Let her play with her computers. If she fails, she can always come work as our IT support." Even James, her younger brother, joined in, though his mockery was more subtle. "Maybe you could build us a better website for the firm?" he suggested, chuckling lightly, as if designing websites were the pinnacle of technological achievement. Olivia's cheeks burned with humiliation. She tried again, her voice trembling slightly. "This isn't just about building websites or doing freelance tech work. I'm talking about creating something revolutionary, software that will change how businesses operate globally." But no one listened. Her father waved her off dismissively, while her siblings exchanged amused glances. The room seemed to shrink around her, suffocating her with their indifference. It wasn't just rejection, it was outright dismissal, as if her dreams were nothing more than childish fantasies unworthy of consideration. After dessert, Olivia excused herself early, unable to endure another minute of their ridicule. She drove back to her tiny apartment, a stark contrast to the sprawling estate where her family lived, and collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. On the coffee table lay her meticulously crafted business plan, its pages worn from countless revisions. Every word represented years of sacrifice, late nights and sleepless weekends spent learning, coding, and strategizing. Yet none of it mattered to her family. As she stared at the ceiling, a fierce determination ignited within her. They wouldn't understand? Fine. They refused to see her potential? So be it. But she vowed then and there that she would prove them wrong, not for their approval but for herself. From that moment forward, Olivia began living 2 lives. To her family, she remained the struggling freelancer, scraping by on odd jobs and barely making ends meet. In reality, she poured every ounce of energy into building what would become Blackwood Innovations. She worked tirelessly in secret, taking legitimate freelance gigs during the day to maintain appearances while dedicating her nights to developing cutting-edge software solutions. Her small apartment became both her sanctuary and her prison. The walls bore witness to her sleepless nights and endless frustration. Bills piled up and her savings dwindled, but she refused to give up. Each setback only fueled her resolve. And though her family continued to mock her supposed failure, Olivia knew the truth. She was laying the foundation for something extraordinary. That night, as she sat alone in the dim glow of her laptop screen, Olivia whispered a silent promise to herself. "One day," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest, "they'll see. Not because they deserve to, but because I'll make sure of it." The days following that fateful family dinner were some of the hardest I've ever faced. If rejection had been a knife, my family's dismissal was a blade twisted deep into my chest. But instead of letting it break me, I used their doubt as fuel. I rented a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, barely big enough for a desk, a futon, and my dreams. My savings account dwindled dangerously low after I invested everything I had into building Blackwood Innovations. There were nights when I went to bed hungry because I couldn't afford groceries, but I didn't care. Every hour I wasn't sleeping, I was coding, designing, or reaching out to potential clients. The first year was brutal. I remember sitting on the floor of that cramped apartment, staring at lines of code on my laptop screen while the heat went out during a particularly cold winter. My fingers froze, but I refused to stop working. I took freelance tech jobs during the day to pay the bills, often driving around in my old Honda Civic to meet clients who thought I was just another struggling coder. Little did they know those freelance gigs were funding something far greater, a revolution in enterprise software architecture. By the second year, things started to shift. I landed my first major client, a mid-sized financial firm desperate for better data management solutions. It wasn't easy. I spent weeks pitching my ideas, refining prototypes, and proving that my system could handle their needs. When they finally signed the contract, I cried, not just from relief but from validation. For the first time, someone outside my family believed in me. That moment became the spark that ignited Blackwood Innovations. As the company grew, so did the challenges. We faced technical failures, funding shortages, and even betrayal from early partners who tried to steal my ideas. Each setback felt like a punch to the gut, but I learned to adapt, to fight smarter. By the 5th year, Blackwood Innovations had become one of the most innovative players in the tech industry. Our cloud computing platform transformed how businesses operated, and our artificial intelligence algorithms set new standards for efficiency. The media began taking notice, calling us the future of enterprise technology. Yet through it all I maintained my cover. To my family I remained the same disappointing freelancer scraping by. They never suspected a thing. At holiday gatherings they'd ask about my non-existent career progress with pitying smiles. "Still doing that freelance thing?" my father would say, his tone dripping with condescension. Meanwhile I sat there quietly, knowing that my net worth had already surpassed the combined value of every law firm in New York. One evening, standing on the balcony of my penthouse overlooking Central Park, I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. The city lights stretched endlessly before me, a testament to what I had built. But as beautiful as the view was, it came with a heavy price. I thought about the countless family dinners where I endured their ridicule, the holidays where I smiled politely while they dismissed my ambitions. Their words still echoed in my mind: tech startups are a dime a dozen. The next morning I climbed into my old Honda and drove to yet another family gathering. As I parked outside my parents' estate, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, weighed down by years of pretending. But beneath the surface I knew I was stronger than ever. Inside, the scene was familiar. My father regaling everyone with tales of his latest legal victories, my siblings nodding along with pride. Diane boasted about her recent promotion to senior partner, while James recounted a high-profile case he'd worked on. I listened silently, sipping cheap wine, feeling the weight of their ignorance pressing down on me. Finally, my father turned to me. "Olivia," he said, his voice laced with mock concern, "you really should consider coming to work for the firm. We could use someone with your unique perspective." He smirked, clearly implying that my unique perspective meant failure. I forced a smile, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. "Thanks, Dad. I'll think about it." Later that night, as I lay awake in bed, I replayed the conversation over and over in my mind. Part of me wanted to scream, to reveal everything, to watch their smug faces crumble under the weight of the truth. But another part of me relished the irony. Let them believe what they wanted. One day they'd see. The moment I saw their resumes, my mind raced with possibilities. Diane and James applying to Blackwood Innovations? My father's law firm pitching services to my legal department? It was as if the universe had handed me the perfect opportunity to teach them a lesson they would never forget. For years they dismissed my ambitions, mocked my career choices, and treated me like a cautionary tale. Now here they were, unknowingly walking into my domain, begging for scraps from the empire I had built while they turned their backs on me. I didn't hesitate. "Michael," I said, leaning back in my chair, "schedule the interviews, but not in the executive suite. Use the small conference room on the 15th floor." He raised an eyebrow but didn't question me. "And their expectations? Let them think they're meeting middle management. Don't mention OW Blackwood at all." As Michael left, I opened my laptop and began reviewing their recent careers. Diane had left our father's firm 2 years ago after failing to modernize its outdated practices. James, meanwhile, had bounced between firms, unable to live up to Dad's impossible standards. They both wanted to join the tech world now, but only because it was trendy, not because they understood or respected it. That evening my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Hey sis, I just applied to this amazing tech company. Put in a good word if you know anyone there." I stared at the screen, my lips curling into a bitter smile. For 10 years she hadn't asked about my work or shown any interest in what I did. Now that she needed something, suddenly my connections mattered. "I'll see what I can do," I replied, knowing full well what tomorrow would bring. The next morning I arrived early, taking the private elevator to the 15th floor. The small conference room had been prepared exactly as I requested. Simple furnishings, no view of the city, nothing to suggest the immense power behind Blackwood Innovations. Through the security feed I watched Diane and James arrive separately in the lobby. Diane wore an expensive suit, her confidence evident in every step. James looked nervous, constantly adjusting his tie. Neither of them realized that their supposedly struggling sister was watching from above, ready to change their world forever. "Send in the first interviewer," I instructed Michael through my earpiece. Sarah Chin, my brilliant chief technology officer, entered the room. She sat down with their resumes, her expression calm but piercing. "Good morning. Let's start with your technical backgrounds." Diane straightened in her chair, adopting the same confident pose she used in courtrooms. "While I don't have direct tech experience, I've overseen several digital transformation projects at law firms." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Could you elaborate on the technical aspects of those projects?" I watched Diane flounder, trying to mask her lack of knowledge with vague legal jargon. James wasn't faring any better. His claims of understanding the tech industry crumbled under Sarah's precise questioning. After 20 agonizing minutes, Sarah thanked them and left. My siblings exchanged worried glances, their confidence visibly shaken. "Send in round 2, I said, my voice steady. This time it was Marcus Rodriguez, my head of innovation. He began asking about their views on emerging technologies, cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, blockchain. Their answers were painfully outdated, filled with buzzwords but lacking any real understanding. This is ridiculous. Diane finally snapped, her frustration breaking through. We're here to interview for executive positions, not tech support. Where is O.W. Blackwood? We should be meeting with actual decision makers. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though I could see him fighting back a smile. Ms. Winters, I assure you this is standard procedure. However, if you prefer to leave— No, James cut in quickly. We apologize. Please continue. 3 more interviewers followed, each one expertly exposing my siblings' lack of qualifications. By the final round, both Diane and James looked utterly defeated. As I watched them squirm through the security monitors, a strange mix of emotions swirled inside me. Part of me felt vindicated, watching them struggle in the very field they once mocked. But another part felt a pang of sadness, for all the wasted years, for the family dinners where they treated me like a failure, for the opportunities they never gave me. When the last interviewer left, I took a deep breath and stood up. It was time. I walked into the small conference room, my heels clicking against the floor. The look on their faces was priceless. Confusion, then shock, then dawning horror as they realized who I was. Olivia? Diane stammered. What are you doing here? We're in the middle of interviews. Actually, I said, taking a seat at the head of the table, you're at the end of your interviews. And they haven't gone well. James leaned forward, his face flushing. What do you mean? How would you know? Because I own this company. I cut him off calmly. I am O.W. Blackwood. The silence that followed was deafening. Diane's mouth opened and closed without sound. James gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. That's impossible, Diane finally managed. You're a freelancer. You work from coffee shops. I laughed, the sound echoing in the small room. No, Diane. That's just what I let you believe. While you were all pitying my career choices, I was building this. I gestured around us. Blackwood Innovations, a Fortune 500 company worth more than every law firm in New York combined. But, James struggled to form words. Yes, I nodded. All these years, while you mocked my coding nonsense and offered me IT support jobs, I was revolutionizing enterprise software. While you bragged about your legal victories at family dinners, I was closing billion-dollar deals. While you dismissed me as a failure, I became one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the world. Diane's face turned an interesting shade of gray. Why didn't you tell us? Why should I have? I shot back. When did any of you ever show genuine interest in my work? When did you ever offer support instead of condescension? I pulled out their resumes, laying them on the table. And now here you are, applying for jobs at my company, not because you're qualified, these interviews have proven you're not, but because you heard Blackwood Innovations was the next big thing. Olivia, please, James started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. Right now, our father is waiting upstairs to pitch his firm's legal services. He has no idea he's about to try to sell to his own daughter, the one he said would never amount to anything in tech. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I have a meeting to attend. Michael will show you out. Oh, and don't bother waiting for callbacks, you're not qualified. As I reached the door, Diane called out, her voice shaking. You can't just leave it like this. I turned back, meeting her eyes. Actually, I can. I spent 10 years letting you all believe what you wanted about me. Now you get to live with the truth. And believe me, this is just the beginning. Walking away from that conference room, I felt lighter than I had in years. But my day wasn't over yet. My father was waiting upstairs, about to experience his own moment of revelation. The best part? He had no idea what was coming. The door to the small conference room opened, and I walked in with deliberate calmness. Diane and James turned to face me, their expressions morphing through a cacophony of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, then dawning horror, as they realized who I was. Olivia? Diane stammered, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? We're in the middle of interviews. Actually, I said, taking a seat at the head of the table, you're at the end of your interviews. And they haven't gone well. James leaned forward, his face flushing red. What do you mean? How would you know? Because I own this company, I replied, cutting him off with icy composure. I am O.W. Blackwood. The silence that followed was deafening. Diane's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, while James gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. That's impossible. Diane finally managed, her voice cracking. You're a freelancer. You work from coffee shops. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the small room. No, Diane. That's just what I let you believe. While you were all pitying my career choices, I was building this. I gestured around us. Blackwood Innovations, a Fortune 500 company worth more than every law firm in New York combined. But, James struggled to form words, his confidence crumbling before my eyes. All these years, I continued, my voice rising slightly, while you mocked my coding nonsense and offered me IT support jobs, I was revolutionizing enterprise software. While you bragged about your legal victories at family dinners, I was closing billion-dollar deals. While you dismissed me as a failure, I became one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the world. Diane's face turned an unflattering shade of gray. Why didn't you tell us? She whispered, her voice laced with shame. Why should I have? I shot back. When did any of you ever show genuine interest in my work? When did you ever offer support instead of condescension? I pulled out their resumes, laying them on the table. And now here you are, applying for jobs at my company, not because you're qualified, these interviews have proven you're not, but because you heard Blackwood Innovations was the next big thing. Olivia, please, James started, but I held up my hand to silence him. I'm not finished. Right now, our father is waiting upstairs to pitch his firm's legal services. He has no idea he's about to try to sell to his own daughter, the one he said would never amount to anything in tech. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I have a meeting to attend. Michael will show you out. Oh, and don't bother waiting for callbacks, you're not qualified. As I reached the door, Diane called out, her voice shaking. You can't just leave it like this. I turned back, meeting her eyes. Actually, I can. I spent 10 years letting you all believe what you wanted about me. Now you get to live with the truth. And believe me, this is just the beginning. I took my private elevator down to the executive conference room, where my father and his team were waiting. Through the glass walls, I watched him standing tall and proud, surrounded by junior partners clutching presentation materials. For a moment, memories flooded back, of me as a child sitting in his office dreaming of making him proud. Now, standing in my own tower, I realized those dreams had changed. Miss Blackwood is ready for you, Michael announced, opening the door. My father turned, his practiced smile freezing as he saw me walk in. Olivia? He stammered, confusion crossing his face. What are you doing here? I sat down at the head of the conference table, enjoying the moment. Hello, Dad. I believe you're here to pitch legal services to Blackwood Innovations. The junior partners exchanged bewildered glances, one of them flipping frantically through his notes. I don't understand, my father said, still standing. We have a meeting with O.W. Blackwood. Yes, I smiled. You do. Please sit down. Realization dawned slowly on his face as he sank into a chair. You're O.W. Blackwood. Yes, I confirmed. Founder and CEO of Blackwood Innovations, the company you're so eager to represent. I turned to the junior partners. I apologize, but this meeting needs to be private. Family matter. They practically ran from the room, leaving me alone with my father. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. How? He finally managed. How did you build a multi-billion-dollar tech company while we thought you were struggling? How did you keep it secret from a family of supposedly brilliant lawyers? I built it the same way I tried to tell you I would. 10 years ago at that dinner, I said, my voice steady. Remember when you said tech startups were a dime a dozen? He flinched at the memory. As for keeping it secret, I continued, that was surprisingly easy. You were all so convinced I was a failure that you never bothered to look closer. Did you know Blackwood Innovations has been featured in Forbes 12 times? That I've been on CNBC? That our IPO was the biggest tech offering of the decade? The apartment, the car, props? He guessed weakly. Exactly, I nodded. I kept them to maintain the illusion you all preferred, the struggling daughter who couldn't match up to her siblings' success. My father's face aged 10 years, or maybe just 10 minutes. Diane and James, they applied for jobs here, he said quietly. Yes, they did, I confirmed. They just finished their interviews. It didn't go well. He straightened in his chair, some of his old authority returning. Now see here, Olivia. They're your family. Surely you could. What, Dad? I cut him off. Give them jobs they're not qualified for? Like you offered me that support position at your firm? I pulled out his firm's proposal. Or should I just hire your firm because we're family? Is that how you think business works? That's not fair, he protested weakly. No, I agreed. What's not fair is spending a decade dismissing your daughter's dreams and abilities because they didn't match your narrow definition of success. I stood up, walking to the windows. Look at this building, Dad. Look at what I built while you were telling everyone I was wasting my potential. He joined me at the window, his reflection showing a mix of emotions I'd never seen before. Shame, regret, and something that might have been pride. Why tell us now? He asked quietly. Because it was time, I replied. Because I'm tired of maintaining the lie. And because I turned to face him. I wanted you all to learn an important lesson about judging people. And have we learned it? A hint of his old sarcasm crept into his voice. I don't know, Dad. Have you? I countered. Your children just applied for jobs at a tech company you said would never succeed. Your firm is pitching services to the daughter you said would never amount to anything. What do you think? He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city. Finally, he turned to me. I was wrong about you, Olivia. I've been wrong for a very long time. Yes, you have, I said simply. After he left, I walked onto the balcony, looking down at the city bathed in golden light. For the first time in 10 years I felt completely free. The next evening I hosted a family dinner in my penthouse. The real one. Not the small apartment I'd used as a cover for years, but the sprawling space overlooking Central Park that truly reflected who I was. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since the day before. Messages from my mother, siblings, even distant relatives who somehow already knew the news. Diane's text read, "I'm so sorry for everything. Can we talk?" James wrote, "I understand now why you kept it secret. I wouldn't have trusted us either." Even my father sent a message, "You've built something remarkable, not despite ignoring my advice, but because you had the courage to follow your own path. I'm sorry I couldn't see that sooner." But I didn't respond immediately. This wasn't a conversation to be had over text or phone calls. It needed to happen face to face. As they arrived, one by one, their eyes widened as they took in the luxury they never knew I possessed. The marble floors, the panoramic windows, the art collection. They all spoke of success far beyond what any of them had imagined. For the first time, I let them see the full extent of what I'd achieved. Once everyone was seated around the dining table, I stood up and cleared my throat. "Before we eat," I began, looking each of them in the eye, "I want to make something clear. This dinner isn't about forgiveness or pretending the past didn't happen. It's about moving forward honestly. Can we do that?" They nodded, appearing appropriately humbled. "Good," I said, allowing myself a small smile. "Then let me tell you the real story of how I built Blackwood Innovations. No more secrets. No more hiding. Just the truth." For the next hour, I recounted everything. The struggles of the early days, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices I made while maintaining the facade they believed in. I told them about the times I sat quietly at family dinners, enduring their ridicule, knowing I was worth more than they gave me credit for. I described the irony of hearing them dismiss tech startups as worthless while I was quietly building one of the most valuable companies in the world. When I finished, there was silence. Then, slowly, my mother reached across the table and took my hand. "Olivia," she said softly, "we were wrong. So wrong. And not just about your career, about everything. We should have supported you. We should have listened." My father leaned forward, his expression unusually vulnerable. "I spent so many years trying to mold you into what I thought you should be," he admitted. "But I failed to see the incredible person you already were. You didn't need my approval, you earned your success on your own terms. I couldn't be prouder of you now, even if it's 10 years too late." Diane chimed in, her voice trembling. "I can't imagine how hard it must have been to keep this from us. I'm sorry for every time I mocked your work or treated it like a hobby instead of the empire it turned out to be." James added, "And I'm sorry for underestimating you. You proved everyone wrong, not just us but the entire industry. You're an inspiration, Liv." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. This wasn't about pity or guilt, it was about understanding. Finally I stood again, raising my glass. "I want to leave you with one last thought," I said, meeting each of their gazes. "The best revenge isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. For years I carried the weight of your doubt, but I realized that the only person whose opinion truly mattered was mine. If there's anything you take away from tonight, let it be this: never underestimate someone else's potential, or your own." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a decade I felt completely free. The press caught wind of the story soon after. Headlines screamed, "Tech billionaire's secret identity revealed." Reporters camped outside my building, eager for a statement. But I ignored them. Their opinions no longer held any power over me. The next morning I walked into my office wearing success openly, no more pretenses, no more hiding. My family had learned their lesson about underestimating people, and I had learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply living your truth. As I stood on the balcony of my penthouse later that day watching the city wake up, I reflected on everything that had brought me here. 10 years ago, I was a young woman desperate to prove herself to a family that refused to see her value. Now I was a CEO, a visionary, and someone who had finally found peace, with herself and with those who mattered most. Sometimes I thought the greatest victories aren't the ones we win against others. They're the ones we achieve within ourselves.